Let's go to Simisi, where we have Mulalo from Polokwane, South Africa. And that question was also reflected in another question here. How can we be sure that there are no medium and long-term side effects? So you talked, you said, yeah, it's safe, but only as far as we can see. So this person is asking, how can we be sure that in a year's time, I don't have another head growing or a tail, and in 5 years' time, yeah.
We had addressed that question, Prof, but I'll go through it again. So, like I had said before, the vaccines have been around for decades. So, fine, the COVID vaccine is a new vaccine, but vaccines have been around for decades, and there have been no major side effects. Millions of people are vaccinated annually, and over 90% of the side effects occur within the first few days and will resolve on their own. And vaccines undergo rigorous tests, and there's continuous monitoring for safety and to detect any rare adverse events. So the risk of having an adverse event far outweighs is outweighed by the benefit of actually getting vaccinated for a severe disease. I know there was a concern about the clotting, but it's about, I'm not sure of the exact figures, but it's a very small number of people who actually got the clots. And
so risk benefit is important, like with anything, even drinking water.
Definitely.
You have a particular risk, but there's a benefit to it. Okay, so one last question for you. Are certain vaccines more effective than others? So how do I go about choosing? Let's say I had a menu of all these vaccines. So how would I go about choosing that I'm going to go for Moderna, or I'm going to go for Sinovac? What are the sort of considerations that I should think about?
I'm not sure currently if we can actually choose which vaccine we want because of availability, number one, also because of like different countries and what they're getting. And in South Africa, we have the Johnson & Johnson one because it's proven to be effective against the current strain. In terms of effectivity, yes, they will differ in effectivity. The Pfizer one and the Moderna one are around 95% and 94% effective, respectively. And then Sputnik is 92%, Novavax about 89% effectivity, AstraZeneca at 70%, and J&J, which is what we use in South Africa, is 66%. And the one which is appearing to be the lowest is Sinovac.
Okay, but at least even with 50% efficacy, that's still better than nothing, right?
Nothing, definitely, definitely.
Because it means 1 in 2% is protected. I mean, the malaria vaccine, I think, had something like 30% efficacy, but now they have a new one which is apparently 70%. So, okay. Thank you very much. Emmanuel, you got a question that you've chosen and you would like to answer it?
I will address the one you put to me about if I've been vaccinated, am I free to travel? That's an interesting one because I think the recommendations will vary between different countries. I've seen recent information from the CDC in the States where they're toying around with the idea of if you've been vaccinated, you can freely share space or visit people that have been vaccinated as well. But I think to have a blanket statement to say, yes, you're free, I think I would default to saying, follow the guidelines in your jurisdiction on that score. I mean, it sounds like a logical thing to say I've been vaccinated, but I think we also need to remember what we said at the beginning, that it minimizes the risk of you getting severe disease. It doesn't say you're not going to get disease. So we need to remember that, especially if you're around people that are probably prone to, or I would say people that are more vulnerable than you are, you need to be cognizant of that fact. It's not gone, it's still there.
Yes, yes. And there's an interesting story about Israel and I think it's Ecuador, where they had very high vaccination rates. But then Ecuador just thought, we can get back to doing whatever we do, no masks. And now COVID is coming back. Whereas Israel has said 100% vaccination, but still you continue to do the non-pharmaceutical guidelines, you continue to observe those. Right.
I wanted to comment on one issue. I think Prof. Nyazema has put something that we probably need to highlight on emergency use authorization, that there's a difference between that and approval. I think my contribution would be, because of where we are, where things are developing as we go, it's necessitated the use of these emergency use authorizations, which effectively means that the vaccines are being used as the nature of that statement is emergency use. It's not following what we normally do, but because we need to get something that we have worked on and have got the numbers to prove that it does work. But I mean, it's a good question to say what happens in the long run. We don't know, but it's better than not doing anything.
Yeah, so it's a life and death issue, right?
In the danger of developing a more potent strain. So
yeah, okay. So there's a comment here about, is it not misleading to say vaccines are safe, even though there hasn't been enough post-marketing surveillance done?
We wanted to pick that one. Given a chance. Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's somehow one would really think that it is misleading, but I think that's the best that can be applied than to say vaccines are not safe. Because what we are dealing with, just as my previous colleague Emmanuel has just presented, we are dealing with an emergency. I think we all need to be clear and understand. We need to understand on that. We're dealing with an emergency, it's a crisis. Yeah, and it's a global crisis for that matter. So the principles, just as my colleague had also presented, for issues of biologicals, medicines and many others, are not different. And I think there was a question about the rush and all that, which I think they were also very well tackled. So the safety of the vaccines, just like many drugs, are coming from the data presented based on the trials that were done. So issue of post-market surveillance is something that is coming as next step, whether we can call it a phase 4 after authorization. So any drug will undergo the same. So the safety is in relation to the trials that were done, the phase 3 trials. However, when doing the phase 4, which is the which also includes the post-market surveillance, we continue to monitor the vaccine use and how it is faring on the market. So we still say the vaccine is safe based on the evidence that's been generated. But as we continue to use the vaccines, just like any other drug, we also continue to monitor, and the regulatory authorities are responsible to help and handle that. So like in our case, we understand we have got the adverse events following immunization, but we also sometimes we also have the adverse events of special interest. Because with the little data that was available at that time, I'm calling it little comparative to the general use, which is, we are talking of maybe 40,000 that we are seeing. We might not have been able to pick some of the IFEs or some of the cases because of very few individuals, because some of the IFEs may be 1 in a million. So you need a larger, a larger group. Hence, we need to continue monitor for these things. So it's better to use the word safe for now, because we need also to use the medicines, and it's a normal principle that is applied across. However, the post-market surveillance needs stronger and an inclusion of vaccine safety-related surveillance, which I think we are continuing to do, and it's a normal practice across medicine use.
Thank you very much. And I think it highlights the fact that why we have these workshops or this kind of webinar is so that when people get vaccinated, they need to report. We under-report side effects in Southern Africa. I mean, I know that because when I worked in a rural hospital, I was probably the only one filling in those yellow forms. And nobody ever got back to me when I submitted them. So obviously we need to invest in pharmacovigilance. We need to invest in technologies for pharmacovigilance. Right. Thank you very much, colleagues. we are coming to the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of my panelists, I'm going to give them, tell us one message that you would like us to take away, right? But before we get there, let me just get one or two comments or questions from the audience. Is there anybody who wants to make a quick comment?